Hi, I'm Mariayah Kaderbhai, and you're joining us for this Luxor Q&A. We are joined by writer-director Zeina Durra, archaeologist, actor and production designer, I think, a little bit for the film, Salima, Ikram, star of Luxor, Andrea, Riseborough, editor Andrea, Chignoli, and DOP Zelmira, Gainza. Welcome, all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think we've got a truly international Q&A. I think we're covering most points around the world today. Zeina, I want to start with you. First of all, congratulations on the film. And is it true, am I right in thinking the film came to you in a dream?
Yes. So I was really down about a film that I've been trying to make for a while, since my first movie. And we've got it cast, it was almost ready to go. And then something happened, and Paul Webster, who was producing it, told me, Zeina, we're going to make this film, but I think you have to go away, make something else, and then we'll come back to it. And that, I was just so depressed, and I had a dream that night. I when you're just sitting and you're thinking about your life and the choices you've made and how you've gotten in a situation, and I went to bed that night and I had this dream. And then in the morning I woke up, I was like, wow, that's pretty intense. And Zelmira, who's shot it, is an old friend of mine. And I just called her up to tell her what had happened, and just kind of talking about it. And I told her about the dream. I said, you know what, actually, this might be a film. And so we started to talk about I started to explain to her the images and sort of use that as a really amazing, she's a great sounding board. And from that, I realized that there was a film there, and Zel was like, listen, I think there's a film here, and if you want me to, I'll shoot it. And I said to her, listen, I just had an idea. What happens if we make it for nothing and we go out there? Would you shoot it for free? I mean, what happens if I self-fund? And I had this whole crazy idea. I just wanted to shoot so badly. And she's like, yeah, sure. So then I get on the phone with an Egyptian producer who I told Zel about. I'm sort of close friend of mine, Mo, who I've met, and maybe he can give me some tips about shooting there, for nothing. And Mo was like, well, actually, I'm in London because I've got a film at the London Film Festival. I can meet you down the road in 2 hours, because he was in Kensington, which is completely random. I thought he was in Cairo. Met him. He's like, this is great. I'll make it. I'm like, okay. We just had literally an email of notes that I'd written. I read out to him. And then he says, just see if Paul can get involved. So I text Paul, I've got this great idea. Can you come on board? He says, sounds great. I'll exec produce it. And then there you go. And that's how the film started, basically.
The films don't normally come together so easily.
It was 9 years between my first film that had done really well critically and was in competition, US competition at Sundance, which is the number, in the US, the biggest deal. And, and so it was really heartbreaking that it took so long to make a film, and I was just determined nothing was going to get in my way. I mean, literally, I made the film with these guys in 18 and a half days, edited it in about, how long was it, Andrea? 21 days?
21 days.
Yeah, from
in the hottest season in London.
Yeah, in this room, which is on the 6th floor of my house, which means it's like a sauna in here. So we were we edited it in my house in 21 days with having I just did everything to make sure this film could be made, and I wouldn't have done it without these guys, because obviously everyone really went in to this in a very kind of indie guerrilla filmmaking way.
If we get into kind of the central themes of obviously going to bed and then waking up and kind of having this dream of Luxor, having a dream of a woman, perhaps, is that correct?
A woman just walking through the ruins, and I was trying to analyze the emotions that I had felt in the dream and what it was about. I do have a neighbor who is from Luxor. I mean, she's from she's Italian, Egyptian, and she spends a lot of time there, and she grew up there, and she always talks about it, and she has this really interesting charity that I was talking to her about. So it probably was somehow in my mind, but I think it was really the idea of a place of I think I'm very interested in the dynamic between the visual layers of different civilizations within a story, and how that can it's so much more powerful than words, almost just those visuals, and what that can say for the story. And I kind of started from there. Why is she there? you know, what she, and, you know, and the interesting thing about these ruins in the Middle East and North Africa is that in times of conflict, they're normally empty, and the only people visiting are either people on the NGO side, because they're there because they're with, like, you know, MSF or whatever, and they have a couple of days off, or the military guys. So, like, for example, Petra during the Iraq War was empty, except you'd have these like big burly generals walking around, or like GI Joe guys, or then you'd have like some person from Oxfam, you know, like, you know, and literally you couldn't get more opposite dynamics. But that, so I found that really interesting, that you could see the conflict in this tiny space, which also is a remnant of a civilization, you know, part civilization, and how history is cyclical and all these themes. But you do that in just by the location. You see what I mean?
And you have kind of, in that kind of cyclical theme, you have the theme, kind of Hannah's theme of kind of trauma and that kind of past trauma, and then kind of coming back to a present that she's trying to perhaps, you know, recapture in the kind of backdrop of Luxor and in the kind of past and the ancient. And so coming on to kind of Andrea's involvement then in the film, kind of writing Hannah, did you have Andrea in mind for that, or kind of did you just, you know, want to write this character kind of who had suffered trauma and then wanted to, you know, try and navigate through it?
So I wrote the character as this woman who had suffered. I realized it's a very cathartic. Andrea always talks about this, and I was like, yeah, whatever. And actually, you know what, she's really right. And actually, my husband said that too, Andrea, that it was a very cathartic film for me to write, because I was also dealing with my own trauma, and also being a mother, the sadness of being a mother, you know, in this very precarious world that we live in, that we never thought it could get even worse than it was. You know, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And I think I was a new mother when I wrote this. My kids were sort of like, you know, 3 and 1, you know, or 4 and 2, you know, 4 and 2. And I think all those themes, along with my own, all the heaviness I've carried, also the idea of like looking at yourself through past relationships. My husband, apparently, when I met him, said I was like Andrea in the movie, but Hannah, by the way. Apparently I was just traumatized. I don't believe that, but apparently I was, according to him. He's like, yeah, that was totally you. And I'm like, really? So I feel like that there was a lot of me in the film, and then you really have to find someone brilliant to do that, and it's really hard, because, you know, how do you find someone who's so nuanced, who's carrying this weight? And obviously Andrea is for me, the only person who could have done this film. I mean, that Andrea and I, when we were like editing, the whole time, like, oh my God, like, it's really, this film could only happen because of her. And then Zell, when we were shooting, we'd be like, oh my God, look what she's doing, you know? So it was really exciting that we found Andrea, who was also, like, the material obviously spoke to her, and we did it, we got it together. Like, what was it, like 3-4 weeks you were in from Senegal to?
Yeah, I was shooting in Senegal, and then I was going to Toronto, and I had 4 weeks off. And there was one point when this was going to be 16 days even, wasn't it? I think we ended up having like 17, or 18, which felt like 18, or so originally 17. So I loved Zeina's first film so much. The script that she'd written for Luxor was just so beautiful and mature and sparse and almost old. This sort of old Hollywood love story, in a sense, set in a place that was that really represents thousands of years of understanding spirituality. And so in of itself, Luxor is, and I didn't understand this until I really got there, but Luxor is a character. I mean, the film is for a reason, because the characters are so tiny in its presence, and I just love the script so much.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, and so we talked very, very quickly, and I said, well, I have sort of 3 weeks to do it. There's this 3-week slot. If we could do it in that time, and I was wrapping up a different project, and I had a lot of space toward the end of that project to research Hannah and to research where she'd been on the Jordanian-Syrian border, and that afforded me the sort of opportunity to sort of take with a lot of image. What I really would have loved to have done was to go there. Failing that, there was a lot of research, and I felt like not only did I hold that as we were making the film, but it's forever imprinted on my brain. Those images, the things that I learned. So it came together
so much. So much is unsaid, which I think is the beauty of it as well. It's not you don't have to often have the spelt out backstory kind of to understand someone's present or what they're going through. But I'm wondering, you said you've done a lot of research, but working with Zeina, how much of the backstory was cemented already kind of, in your head before, shooting actually even began? Did you build it? Did you build it yourself?
Yes, and I think in a strange way, through saying so little, Zeina is able to communicate a lot. One of the most innovative things about her work, I think, is that she explores conflict from a very different perspective. And in a sense, it was there for me for that reason. It was already there. Apart from the fact we had very little time in terms of it coming together, which you can see as a sort of negative thing, but also there was a really positive part, which was that we were completely immersed in the experience. There was no second guessing. And I felt almost like I was the sort of custodian of what Hannah had seen. So I carried that, and we watched her walk, and we watched her try, having experienced what she'd experienced, to then reignite some recognizable hope, and she does that in part through Sultan. And she certainly does that by almost transitioning back into what she knows as life, which might be a quite empty apartment in London somewhere that she doesn't get to very often, by going to this very decadent hotel, into palace, as a sort of transitional point, perhaps on the way to whatever home might be. So in a way, that part was something that I carried quite quietly, and it's not something that we talked. But I think had Zeina and I not had the shorthand that we had immediately when we first talked, and had I not responded to it in the way that I did, we couldn't have had that. We would have presumably she would have had to be schooling me, pretty much constantly. And we weren't on a schedule like that. We were on a schedule that demanded sort of tacit understanding of what we were going to achieve, in a sense. And it's a big responsibility. I wanted so much to do well for Zeina. I wanted so much to not be, I wanted to show somebody who was trying to live. Want to, I think so, so many of us, when we go through challenging times in our lives, as we all do, and now really is one of those times, there's this incredible strength that humans have to this incredible resilience and hope amidst chaos, and to survive, and to not just survive but thrive. So I think, honestly, most of what we talked a lot about where we were in the story, didn't we, Zeina? Like in each given moment, we talked about, in terms of the narrative.
I don't even remember that. I just remember, honestly, having this bizarre psychic connection, like, okay, we've got to go. We've got like 20 minutes.
When I say where we were in the story, I mean, I literally am referring to, have I just come out of this building?
Yeah. So basically, it was very like, it was literally like, okay, you're walking from here to here, and this comes here in the script, just in case you forgot, which she never forgets. So you kind of you don't have to do those tasks. Yeah. And like it literally, we shot, you know what I'm saying? Like some of those scenes were shot in an hour, like, you know, it was mad.
Coming on to that kind of then Zelmira kind of, it doesn't look at all like it was shot in 18 days and at all kind of a rush at all. And in terms of picking up on what Zeina and Andrea have talked about, in terms of tone and texture and the beautiful silence to it, I imagine that, you know, adds maybe, I don't know, maybe a little bit more pressure on kind of the way that things look and the way they frame and the feel of the film is so important. When I was watching it, it's so important, kind of, you know, Luxor is kind of another character within it, and it's framed beautifully, and so much of the film is so still to allow you to kind of understand what Hannah's going through, but understand how there's a relationship between space and emotion, and kind of just working with Zeina, both of you, to kind of create that in such a short space of time. Yeah, how did that magic happen?
I think it helped a lot that Zeina and I knew each other. We were already good friends, and so we talked a lot, and Zeina would send me references like, I like this from this film, I like this scene, I like this photograph. And then I knew her previous film, which I loved, and I know her home, so I have a sense of her aesthetic, which is very, very refined, very distinct. She knows exactly what she wants. She frames, she says, you know, she picks the lens, she frames, but we had long conversations at the beginning about, she wanted it to feel textured, layers. She says, that's how I work, in the script, in the production design, in the costume. So we discussed all of that. It wasn't just, all right, you set up the camera and the lights. It was really sort of, okay, what colors, what shirt? This scene happens here, so this shirt will be against this background, and the light had to be soft and naturalistic and always feel like there weren't any lights, although we had a truckload of them. Sometimes we didn't use them, you know, if the available light was good enough, we went with that, but there was a lot of contrast. It's very, very bright and contrasty there, so sometimes we needed them, and we had, you know, a night exterior in the desert, which I think we shot in an hour 20 minutes.
That was amazing. You should have seen that. I mean, it looked like it was moonlight, and we had, like, I don't know how we did it. I have this great shot of everyone, like, I have no idea. We had we had literally an hour.
Yeah, we had an hour, but you know, normally you would get a day, like a whole night, probably you get 12 hours for that kind of scene. But, you know, we worked it out. It was very important, sort of timing everything. I learned exactly how long sunset was, that those 15 minutes after sunset when it's blue and you've still got a little bit of time in the sky. That was the only time that I would really sort of push people a little bit. Maybe, you know, at the end I'd say, I'm sorry, but we got it, it's okay. And then also Luxor itself is so spectacular that it was very much also, like Zeina said, Luxor is a character and we need to see her in it, and we need to feel her trauma and her loneliness, but we also need to be with her. So we had this combination of wides, and Zeina designs really, you know, very strong wides that say a lot about the character and the place and the character's relationship to the place, and the place's commentary on the person's, you know, state of mind at the time. But then also there would always be, we're up close with Andrea, so that you can just sort of, you know, read everything that's going on inside on her face. But yeah, it was great working because Zeina had a vision, and not all directors always do, or as pronounced a vision. And it was really sort of, this is what I want it to look like. And I'd be like, okay, now let's just see if I can get it done in time.
And then coming on to Salima, kind of as the archaeologist and then turned actor within the film, and you know, helping kind of I think but they're kind of helping with some kind of, you know, setting Luxor up as a kind of backdrop and production design. How did you kind of meet Zeina? How did this fortuitous relationship begin? Well, I think you're on mute.
Oh.
We have a mutual friend, Nigar, who introduced us. She said, oh, you've got to meet my friend Zeina. She's making a film and she has some questions. And then I think we just phoned, texted, met for a while. And Zeina was terribly intense and terribly excited. And I was the person who kept saying, oh no, that's not right. Oh no, you can't say that. So
No, it's great.
but then, you know, when she started telling me the story, there were all these things that resonate so much with the grand idea of ancient Egypt and of the ancient Egyptians. So all of this idea of resurrection, rebirth, new experiences is something that's really integral to ancient Egypt. And so a lot of what Andrea was experiencing and all the healing, as well as, you know, some of the dream sequences and the power of the place resonated very much. So we had a lot of fun talking about which sites would be good. And, you know, we said, you have to go to Abydos, or you have to go to the Tar Temple. So it was really fun talking about things that would work. And the more we talked about the story and looked at the script, there was more, you know, the little bits and pieces of ancient Egypt that seemed so appropriate to Andrea Hanna's healing process and becoming whole again, and sort of after all of this horror and trauma. And it was very much, in a way, the journey that the ancient Egyptians have. So it's sort of this metaphor of going through, facing your demons, you know, the lakes of fire, the spitting cobras, or any hardships, and then going through them and slowly, step by step, being able to make it into this reborn state of being whole again. So that was really fun and resonated with the place and with ancient Egyptian religion, as well as aspects of modern Egyptian religion. So that was really fun.
Zaina, are there any places that Salima introduces you that have kind of a quite profound impact on you in terms of kind of script, or do they change it in any way?
So I can't remember where I started, but I remember that my friend Negar Azimi, one of my great friends, this is really a film inspired literally by my friends, you know, like talking to them. And she said, you know what, if you're going to film there, you've got to read an article, an interview that I have with Salima Ikram, a great friend of mine from Cairo, who's like one of the, you know, the best archaeologists. You've got to speak to her. And it's all about this feminist tomb, that kind of a feminist takeover a tomb in the Valley of the Kings. And it really goes with your idea of this female protagonist who's like this kind of dynamic character. And I said, okay, so that sounds great. So then I read the article, I'm like, this is brilliant. So I based the first draft on like information I got from that. And then I spoke to Salima, and it opened a door, because the way I like, you know, I'm never going to know everything, right? So I love to speak to like minds like Salima. I say, these are the themes. This is kind of what I'm thinking of. What do you think? And then she would like suggest like most of the places she suggested. And then if I sometimes weirdly had a psychic connection with the place, she goes, oh, that's because, you know, like I loved Sekhmet, and Salima told me, well, you know, she's the patron saint of physicians, so that really makes sense. And we kind of went further with that, and basically Salima is one of those people that honestly, if I'd met her, I always say, if I'd met her when I was like 8 years old, I'd be an archaeologist, because she just it's just her knowledge and her love of the subject, and the way she deals with it is so infectious that it kind of suddenly, modern day life suddenly relates to ancient Egypt, you know. And also because she's a professor, she's wonderful as an actor, because she already performs in front of her classes. I mean, I think that's why it was just so easy for her to be on you know, on set and with no problems. I mean, she was literally a super strong actor. So yeah, so I think for many reasons it worked out. And also the best part for me was the production design. So the Egyptian production designer was a bit like, you know, laid back, and I was like, guys, have you did you do it? Did you do everything? Did you speak to me? Like, yeah. We go there, and he was like, I had to take them. I go, it looks great. She goes, yeah, well, I took them in the car the minute I got to set. Like, do you want to tell the story? I mean,
we had a little bit of shopping to do, a little breaking of pots, a bit of setting up, a little bit of, you know, just a bit of firm hand was needed here and there, because they were a bit lackadaisical.
Yeah, relaxed.
But because of her expertise, I mean, literally, she went in, we had them, and then her actual crew that did the dig, because we filmed in a place which Salima worked in for a very long time, right? How many years were you doing that dig?
I've been working there on and off for about 12 years, but we had so much fun, because the whole story is indeed about these strong women who take over this king's tomb, and all the burial equipment belongs to them. And it's very intense, because it's all about their power, their prestige, their sort of strengthening, as it were, starting off from a rather a low point to ending up on a very high note. And it was delightful because we wound up with having our workers who are so thrilled in the end, because I said, you must watch this film at some point. So we're going to have a screening. All of the workers. We're planning to do that once this mess is over. But they were so delighted, and it was really nice to be able to share this extraordinary tomb in a way that is not, not a documentary or whatever, but really something that is completely different. And it's not a jazzy tomb, but when you start looking at it with the details, it's got so much to tell you and so much to share. So it's really beautiful, I think. Of course, I'm biased.
That's why we did it. It's really profound.
And Andrea, coming to you now, I've spoken and touched on a little bit of obviously the silence in the film, and Luxor obviously acting as kind of one of the kind of main agents, main characters of the film. Just in terms of editing the film, how do you marry the idea of silence and space kind of effectively, kind of?
Yes, I remember one of the themes that we discussed with Zeina is how important it was for us to convey that this character was resurrecting or healing herself through her own means, and not necessarily because she meets a man, So in a way, we were always balancing all the encounters that this character had all along the film with the moments that she had for herself, the moments of silence and introspection. So I think basically what we did with Zeina is just to try to have a good balance between the screen time that Hannah, the character, had with herself and with the space. And also you have to understand that this character is in between jobs and not exactly in a vacations because she's highly traumatized. So I think those moments in real life, the time acquires a special subtleness, and so we wanted to convey that she's like observing and contemplating life in a new shape, in a new way. And Zeina was very, very helpful, and we were together finding that very subtle balance between the most talkative parts of the script and the parts that you can feel that very precise sense of present time and contemplation.
We've had quite a few questions come in from the audience at home, so let's try and answer some of them. So someone is asking how it was to shoot in Luxor, how you got access to the various monuments, and what the meaning of the ones, and especially the meaning of the ones that you focused in on. I know that you've touched on that a lot, including Abydos.
Okay, so
that's like three-pronged.
I'll just do the production stuff. The production was that Mo is one of the best producers in Egypt, and so we got all the permits through his relationships, and also because I have an Arab name. I think it was easier for them to see it as not like a massive Hollywood film coming in. So on our budget, we could still do it with Egyptian rates. You see what I mean? Because we were like a British Egyptian film. And so we managed to somehow get that. Now, I think for the shooting part, go to Zel, because... and then maybe Abydos, Salima,
yeah. Shooting in Luxor was amazing. I had one of the best camera and lighting grip crews that I've had. They were so fast. I mean, we had to go fast, and they said to me one day, I said, God, you guys are just the fastest. They went, oh, we don't usually work this fast. I go, no. They go, no, we're doing it because everyone is doing it, sort of everyone really pulled their weight. So there was a lot of goodwill, and it was just, I mean, I've never shot in locations like that. It was so exciting. It was such a privilege. So yes, I mean, there was always the challenge of time. Very fast sunrise and sunset. So anytime you wanted one of those effects, it had to be extra quick. And then shooting in these very old locations, you had to be very careful. I couldn't just put lights everywhere, and I didn't have, you know, the biggest, most powerful lights as well. So it was really sort of, the challenge was, you know, allotting time, like saying this scene will need this one will make do with that. So, you know, choices, but it was a fantastic experience.
And then Salima.
Well, it was, I mean, amazing to see what you did with the spaces, because watching the film, it was exquisite. There were some shots of just breathtaking, and these sites are magnificent, but you really made them more gorgeous than ever. And Abydos, which is this leitmotif that goes through, is the place of resurrection where the god Osiris lives. And so that was one of those focal points. And in the beginning, I think when Zeina and I were talking, they were actually going to go there. And then it became that sort of point at the end. And it was just so beautifully done, because this is, for the ancient Egyptians, that's the beginning and the end. And so that was one of the reasons why that was chosen. And of course, the Sekhmet place was chosen because of its power and potency. And she is the goddess of physicians, but also of warfare and protection of women. So you have all of that package.
And then I just to Andrea, Andrea, we were missing in the rhythm of the film, we were missing this leitmotif, and Andrea was the one that really pulled that out, because I thought it was obvious, but Andrea was like, no, I think it's about ending it about Abydos. And Andrea, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, the word Abydos was mentioned all along the film, but it didn't have like a payoff. And all of a sudden, I had this idea at nighttime, and then I went back to Zeina's house in the morning. I was like, they should end the film saying, let's go to Abydos, of course, because Abydos is this symbol of healing, of rebirth, you know. And so it's fantastic how editing allows you to sometimes create new sentence and have them in the reverse shot. And so you, in a way, there's always a rewriting of the script. I mean, the script had already that, but you needed to somehow put it in the foreground a little bit more emphatically.
And it gave it like almost like a spiritual weight, perhaps, that might not everyone. Now I feel it's like super accessible with the ending of Abydos. But what's interesting production-wise is that we had planned to shoot in Abydos, and we had the permits, and it is one of the most breathtaking places, because there's just these shards of light that come out from anywhere. It's so holy that even like the most skeptical of the Egyptian crew, like the kind of grips, were standing there like meditating. You know, it was like, it's that kind of insane. And I have to say that it was really heartbreaking we couldn't go there, but I knew we have 18 days, or 17 days time. There is no way we're going to be able to get there in 8 hours, come back, actually be compos mentis for the next day. I'm just going to have to allude to the place. And that was really difficult. So what was wonderful is that somehow, you know, and I really believe about the energy of a project, somehow it made itself known. And Andrea had this wonderful, you know, moment at night. Of course, it had to come at night, because as Salima always says, like, Luxor has its own energy and it's everywhere, you know. So I feel like it was a wonderful way to end the film.
So someone's asking, has it been released in Egypt and seen around other areas of the Middle East? And if so, how has it been received?
So I know that it was shown in Jordan in the open air cinemas in the summer. And I think it's really interesting, because my mother went and she said that there were some people that totally got it and other people that didn't really have the attention span. So, you know, so that's what she told me. So, and then in Dubai, we're in the cinema right now that's doing, it's doing really well. And we're like on streaming services there, because obviously because of COVID, I mean, I think Dubai is the only place with cinemas that are open. So yeah, so it's doing really well there. But you know, I think when people there, if they're not necessarily from a particularly kind of arts background, they might be looking for like a more snappy movie, you know, especially if it's like set in the Middle East. And this is much more like a film which really requires you to think, and it leads your hand but doesn't give you the answers. And I think culturally some people really get it and some people don't, you know.
And it's even on the idea of kind of thinking, Andrea, in terms of the central relationship between Hannah and Sultan. What did you think? Do you think that it kind of, she was going back to rekindle, or was it catharsis? Was it to find closure? Was it all of those things? Did it ever play in your, did you kind of ever think, what is she going back for?
I think in those times of challenge, we all hold, whether it's we all hold certain people close to our heart to get us through those times, you know. For me, it would be my mum, my dad, my sister, you know. And Hannah and Sultan have had this experience of they've lived that part of life in your late teens, early 20s, where you're standing on the precipice of hope and excitement. And
the first time,
of hope for her. She certainly wants to rekindle that hope in herself, I think. And she has, by no means does she know that she's going to see him. It's a transitional spot for her on the way back to what might be some sort of normality. But I think she's drawn there wanting to rekindle a hopefulness that she knows to be true, that she knows is real. It makes a lot of sense to me as a human, you know. It made a lot of sense as I read it that she would do that. And with she can't be assured that she might see him there. It's a surprise when she sees him. It's strangely awkward because it's so telling. She's found out, she's exposed, she's found out. She's trying to rekindle something. It's not a story about somebody finding themselves. It's a story about a person having gone through the experiences she's gone through, finding out how then to live on. And Sultan represents that hope for her. And
what you've all created so beautifully, those kind of is that dance between two people, you know, kind of the people, you know, like you said, that kind of have known each other in a time of life when they're kind of forming each other's identity, and then go away and have lives, and then you come back and you're right, there's the awkwardness because you've known each other so intimately in a different world, and then you've got you beautifully play that dance around each other, a nervous dance, which is just really elegantly done by all of you. We've got a couple more questions. Zeina, someone's asking about the costume design of the film.
So, I mean, it was interesting because I just spoke about the cultural thing. So I was really inspired by The Passenger because I loved how the color palette of her wardrobe really went with all the kind of architectural story that was sort of laid out. If that makes sense? And so the costume designer was very good at recreating that, and she found us she brought all these colors out, Zed and I looked at them and discussed them, and then we were like, okay, this will stand out amongst the ruins and so on. We didn't want to do the whole khaki white thing because that's colonialists, and because Andrea's like English, I didn't want to have any of that kind of element, right? I didn't want to have like any kind of representation through her clothes, except for the fact that she probably has been living on the road since her 20s, and all her wardrobe comes from like random tailors in Kathmandu and Delhi and Karachi and I don't know, Bogota, who knows, but she's been around the world, she's picked up her clothes, and she has a style about her which also gives her liberates her, because it's not the kind of stuff that anyone's going to really look at her body in, but then she has a way about her where it's kind of effortless and it looks kind of good in a way. So that really worked out. The things that were really funny is that culturally, for example, I just discussed that, obviously like the critics all love the film in the Middle East and everything, but what's interesting is when you're working with this like hip young Egyptian, for them, like showing your arms and a short skirt is like liberation, and like, you know, like, and it's about fighting kind of the oppressor, which is like, you know, dogma and religion. And for me, I don't have that because I was born and brought up in England, and then, you know, I had a stint in New York and then came back here. So, you know, even if my cultural heritage is from that part of the world, and I'm, you know, from a secular Muslim family, it's very much, you know, not an issue for me if I go out in hot pants or not, right? So it was really funny that we had a scene where, you know, what was her name? The hot young kind of hippie chick, I think it was Mariayah, right? It was crazy how I'm blanking. You know, and she could not understand why I wanted Mariayah to look. She was beautiful. She's this beautiful Dutch girl. Mum lives on the Nile, right? And she's grown up there, and she's just stunning, and like this, she had this cool like hippie vibe, and she just bought some of her clothes, like great. And the costume designer got so upset with me. She's like, she's supposed to be sexy in the script, it says sexy, this is not sexy. And I'm like, but it is sexy because she's so beautiful and young and voluptuous and stunning. Like, sexy doesn't mean she has to be like in a black mini skirt dress, cleavage running, you know, on. And she's like, but she's wearing those tights those hijab ladies wear. And it was just so funny, the conversation I was having with her. I'm like, you have to trust me of all people, I'm obsessed by costume design. So it was really funny when you had those moments of trying to explain to, and then, you know, I just had to be like, no, enough, we're doing it this way, thank you for your input, you know, moving on. And obviously not said like that, but and so we got there in the end, but there were these moments where they honestly, sometimes she was very good at executing, but she honestly looked at me like I was completely nuts half the time, you know. So
it kind of almost, it plays into the kind of anti-Orientalist trope of kind of what you think, you know, either someone that's not from there should look like, or someone that is from there should look like, in a way. Yeah. So another question from Finny Dale. I love the film. I'm a psychotherapist and work with trauma. I know that Space and Silence, I know that space and silence are vital. I've also lived in the Middle East as a child, and it was wonderful. I was curious about Hannah's frenetic dance in the hotel.
Okay, so am I? Yeah. I'm going to let Andrea take over. Just to say that I had done a lot of research about PTSD and spoken to psychotherapists, and I'd gone to the border before I'd made this film. I had the character of someone who'd worked for an organization like MSF. So I had already been to the border, to that clinic, and interviewed them for the other film that you know will get made one day. And so that's where I got the kind of psychological. And for me, I noticed that everyone there was kind of like on the edge, but unaware. So they were all there, they were escaping something. And they would say things like, yeah, I like my favorite thing to do. And so what's your favorite thing to do on your off time? Oh, I just chop. I love chopping curry. And I just chop all this food, and I make these big curries, and they kept saying about chopping. I'm like, okay, that's great. And this other like American guy, they all had these really frenetic actions they would do in their spare time. And I found that really interesting, not in a patronizing way, but just in a way of like, how are they processing this kind of trauma that, because their house, the MSF house, obviously we couldn't say she's with MSF because, you know, MSF is an NGO, and you don't want to like, it's tricky being affiliated when you're in a narrative film and so on. But you know, they would be sitting in their house cooking, and suddenly they could hear the sound, the ground shudder, and they knew that there was bombing on the other side of the border, and that they would have to start running to get casualties, to help the casualties. So they were like living this kind of, you know, on the front lines. And I knew that, like, from personal experience, because obviously I'm half Bosnian, and I remember during the war that it was really tough seeing some of my cousins get like wasted when they would come out. Like, a lot of them fled. They were like in their late teens, early 20s. They were young men. They'd obviously maybe had fought, maybe not. We didn't know. We didn't ask. Like, they'd come out, and they were all really, you know, you know. And I remember analyzing that behavior and how sometimes they just wouldn't even want to drink, because it would take them somewhere they didn't want to go. And so I was really interested. I've always been interested in that. And then Andrea can take over.
Yes, it's a difficult time for Hannah to drink, but she really goes for it this one evening. we discussed what that might look like. And first it led us to Prince's Purple Rain. And we imagined, well, there was a moment when I was going to fall off a boat into the Nile. And then somebody flagged that to Zeina and said, oh, she may, that might not be very safe in the middle of the night.
But yeah, we had to have scuba. It was because they said we had to have a scuba diving team, and that there could be crocodiles.
Yeah, Salima's like, that's not safe.
No, that's not true, right? They're up in Aswan, right?
Yeah. So for reasons which seem to be obvious now, we didn't do that. So the scene was then reset in a bar, and we thought about karaoke because it seemed to be something that might be available and so ridiculous and sort of universal, strangely universal. And then Purple Rain, you know, I said, what if she was singing Purple Rain? And Zeina loved that. And so we sort of became obsessed with this idea of having this cathartic release to singing Purple Rain. Of course, we couldn't afford Purple Rain because we probably would have had to mortgage future children that are yet born in order to do it.
Wait, so, they don't give out the rights. They don't give out the rights. The Princess says no.
So we would have had to make friends with somebody related to Prince, probably, or something like that. So anyway, but there was this, when Zeina arrived, there was this fantastic pianist who would play in the bar every night, and she started texting me about it. I was still in Senegal, and she was texting me about this pianist, saying he's great, he can do all of these numbers. And so the night before, we still really hadn't locked down what was going to happen. It was our last day of shooting. We were going to shoot this whatever it was going to be, a song or a dance or some sort of piece of movement the next day, and we were going to shoot day for night. So we were, it was daytime, but we were shooting, and we blacked out the windows, and basically the pianist started playing, and that was it. I mean, we didn't really. In the lead up, we talked about so many things. And then it was the final day, and it was a huge emotional release for so many reasons. And it was the first time that Hannah could really, sort of truly escape. And it just happened. So that's how it happened. It was totally improvised.
I think we have time just for one last question. It's about this script. Zeina, someone's asking, how was it completely scripted, or was there room for improvisation along the way?
So it was scripted predominantly, and then what would happen is I'd find a location like the phone booth, and I'm like, I've got to shoot here. And you know what's great, because it's like, remember when because we're all 90s kids, right? So
I love the phone booth scene.
Phone booth,
carpet.
Like calling your parents when you're traveling and you're like 18, you're like, I'm alive, I'm in Kathmandu, and and I really wanted to have that moment when I came across that phone booth. It just, there's this rush of like fancy hotels, like really dirty clothes, like just going to the hotel to make a phone call, and I thought, well, we have to feature this. And so then we went, and I said I had like an hour. And the great thing about literally being one of the producers, and then also being on such a low budget shoot, that like everyone's kind of letting you do what you want to do, so we just kind of sat in there, and then I gave them some ideas, and then we kind of worked through them, and then all together we decided, like, I'm like, oh, that feels right, that doesn't, let's do this. And they kept on trying, and so that was improvised, but kind of like together, like an improvisation, all of us together. And then I think sometimes they would like have fun banter that would happen. And then also in post, Andrea is the genius. There was a genius of also trying to, like, because we had such a short amount of time, sometimes maybe something wouldn't have come out right, or, and so Andrea was really good at like saying, hey, I think we need to make sure that this is said somewhere. So then we would like do it like an ADR and then put it in. I don't know, Andrea, do you want to talk about that? Because that's also part of the whole improvisation thing.
Yes, as I said before, the good thing about editing is that you can rethink what was already in the script, but maybe you can underline some aspects that were hidden or they were not sharp enough. So yeah, we created a lot of off-screen new dialogues, and probably the biggest change in the script was that the first acquaintance of Hannah, which is this American guy that is very, talkative and funny, we made it a little bit shorter, because again, we didn't want to be a film about this woman being saved by guys, but we wanted to be a woman that is looking through her inner resources and going deep in order to come to find healing, right? And so I think that idea, that was Zeina's idea, the idea that this woman is with her own strength looking for healing, it was key, and Zeina was all the time saying that this is not a fairy tale of a prince that comes to save this woman in trouble, but is about her finding her own resources. And I think when you have a director that has such a strong vision, then it's very easy to shape it in that direction, So I think it was an amazing collaboration with Zeina in that way.
We had so much fun, all of us. I feel like wish we could all be in the same room.
Oh, soon. I want to thank Modern Films. I want to thank all of you, Zeina, Zelmira, Andrea, and Salima. Thank you so much for bringing us to Luxor, and thank you so much for talking about it this evening.
Thank
you. You all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
You.
Speak soon.